It's interesting because social media is discussed so differently if it's an adult talking versus a kid talking. If it's an adult talking that actually had part of their life without it versus a kid who's never had their life without it, it's such a different conversation. So social media with kids, I mean, to say that they mock the word social media. I mean, it's just life.
Welcome to another episode of Sex Plus Christian Parents. I'm Jason, Executive Director for Project 619.
And I'm Thomas, a local pastor in Spokane, Washington.
And one of the things that we're finding is that this is a very different time, a very different place from the last episode.
Absolutely. I mean, right now with COVID-19 going on, we're finding that we're not able to interact with each other like we used to. So we're becoming much more dependent on social media and technology to supplement those moments.
Absolutely. And so it's actually quite providential that we actually have an episode that we were already working on when it comes to this very particular topic, social media. And that's why we've brought in several of our friends to be able to talk about this. To start this conversation, I thought it'd be great for us to hear from Kara.
Yeah, my name's Kara Twining, and I've been a counselor in schools since 1994. So I guess that puts me at about 26 years. Still doing it, still working with kids and loving the high school opportunity that's there for adults to be involved in their lives.
Let's dive in. Listen as Kara defines the role that she sees social media playing in teens' lives today.
That's how you get a hold of people. That's how you tell people what you're doing. That's where you get your info, where you get your news. It's just part of their life. I mean, I always say when I talk to groups, I give this data about in 2011, there was a Pew Research study that asked kids what percentage of their life is online. And teens responded 50%. And then there was another study done in 2017. CNN did another research study and asked basically that same question and found that the teens couldn't find the line anymore. So that's a good perspective to see where we've come. Kids now couldn't tell you, oh yeah, if I never had a phone or a computer, I'd only have half my world. To them, it's, I don't know what I would do. Anyway, so I guess that's a really rough definition, but I think we need to change the narrative on that. It's not this beast that lives alone on an island.
But wait a minute, let's back up. How did we even get here? How is it that we can hardly imagine a world without this thing called social media? This thing that has literally become life for our teens. Let's dive into some quick history, just for fun.
Let's do it. So parents, you probably don't know this, but the first sites that could have been considered social media were Friendster and 6 Degrees. But as we mentioned, you probably hadn't heard of them, as they both quickly faded after a short period of success.
That's right. Around the time these sites started dying out, LinkedIn and MySpace came on the scene, with the former surpassing Google as the most visited site in 2006.
And now we have Facebook, and it's become the most visited site on the internet, and that was in 2008. We're not even talking about now. Other platforms like Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat each started small and then eventually grew to become the world's biggest thing that our kids now see as life.
But we can't forget to mention the smartphone. The arrival of the iPhone in 2007 was a catalyst for the worldwide internet not being something that is out there, but instead something that is right in the palm of your hand. As you know, this has had a massive impact.
It's interesting, Seinfeld, Friends, all those shows. Nobody had a smartphone.
This is Walt Muller. He's a good friend and the president and founder of CPYU, a ministry dedicated to equipping parents, grandparents, and youth pastors on the many topics facing our youth.
And now, when you think about it, it's through TV that you see that world did once exist, and now the smartphone has changed everything.
Since he's been doing ministry for over 30 years, we asked him to share some of the differences he sees between now and when he started back in 1972, before the advent of the smartphone or social media.
Oh, that's a huge change. You add to that the breakdown of the family. 30 years ago, we were talking about the results of the sexual revolution, divorce, cohabitation, those sorts of things. Now we talk about the breakdown of the family, where the family is physically intact, but relationally, perhaps emotionally detached, because even though they're in the same room, they have their noses and their faces and their devices. And so we're seeing the family break down that way. I talk a lot about because I think it's important to talk about expressive individualism, which is the Western secularized worldview where it's all about me. And so I put myself first. The highest value in life and goal is to be authentic. Don't tell me what to do. I'll just trust my feelings. And it's sort of the tail end of, the philosophical turn to postmodernism. It's very, practical now and functional, but that's the way we live.
What Walt brings up here is really important. When you mix this worldview of expressive individualism with social media and a smartphone, you get a massive turn inward. You've seen this selfie generation, and it's truly changed the way our youth see themselves.
That's exactly right, Thomas. Nowadays, our kids feel the pressure to curate images of themselves and their online presence to present the most attractive version of themselves daily. Some even feel the desire to have a personal brand. Kara had some great thoughts on this.
That's been the story all along that we've talked about forever since 2011 is branding, right? That you're going to brand yourself. And we watch media moguls do that. We watch the Kardashians do that. We watch Russell Wilson do that. You feel like you know these people and you know who they are and what they do and how they act because of what they're posting. So then, our kids just jumped right on that and they put their best foot forward or their worst foot, whatever gets more attention. And wherever they get that hook, if they get a hook from being a bad guy, then man, all my posts are going to be about that. If they get a bunch of people liking a sexy photo, well, that's my lane. This is where I'm popular. And then they just kind of become a brand.
Yeah, so when I talk about this, I do a little segment on selfie culture, why kids go to social media, the kinds of unmet needs they hope that it will meet, and we know that it can never fulfill. Ultimately, we're longing for redemption, and this is not going to fix things, or else maybe this is just a diversion to get us away from the pain and heartache of our lives that we don't want to have to deal with. But I'll talk specifically about three things with the selfie culture and the online culture. And it's not just the pictures we take, it's the text we put out, but fabricating, three words I use: fabricating, curating, and promoting self. So the fabricating is creating something. The curating is I want to get it to just look just right. So a museum curator is responsible for an exhibit. So our kids are basically setting themselves up much like a museum curator would, so that when people walk through and see this, it's going to draw them, it's going to be attractive, they're going to want to stay at it, they're going to want to look at it, they're going to want it to get attention. So they fabricate to curate, and then once they've done that, now they start blasting out with a promotion, which to me is, maybe the easiest way says, hey, look at me, hey, look at me. So it becomes very self-centered, and it shifts them from, the good pursuit that we should have, that God calls us to, of cultivating our inner character and being formed into the image and likeness of Christ and finding our identity in who we are as people made in the image of God and redeemed people who are in Christ. But what it does is it just says, you are what you look like, and your value is in the number of followers and likes and shares and whatever else you get.
All right, parents, it's time we point something out to you. Does this behavior sound similar? Placing our value in our attractiveness, accomplishments, or perhaps our contributions to the world? The truth is, we are all guilty of this at times. But even more specifically, we as parents are guilty of doing the very same thing with social media too.
With the parents, I would guess it's pretty much the same thing. It's just that we're at a different point developmentally, and I'm seeing a shift from parents who are really concerned about their kids to fewer and fewer parents getting concerned about their kids because they're immersed as moms and dads in this stuff themselves. They're finding their identity in this. They're putting their kids out there and living vicariously through their kids and their kids' accomplishments and what their kids have done and what their kids look like. They're planning vacations and outings based on how I can curate my family's appearance on social media. Let's take the picture. And, so I think we become immersed in that, and it can become an idol and our primary source of identity ourselves. So, and by the way, I'll just mention, the research now is showing kids are saying they want their parents to get off because they want the time and attention of their parents. So, get off of that stuff, mom and dad, so you can spend some time with me. More and more kids are complaining about that.
Someone asked me, what the biggest change I've seen in working with teenagers in my years. And I think they expected me to say social media. But I really thought about it, and I remember very clearly the first time a student came into my office, asked for a schedule change, and I was like, I can't do that. I'm not going to be able to do that. But can you talk to your parents about this, this, and this, and come see me tomorrow? They left my office, and in 5 minutes, that parent called me. The texting before the social media expedited everything. And when I reflect on that, I think of we've lost the pause. We've lost our pause in our emotions, in our thinking. It's instant. Everything's on demand.
The immediate nature of social media, that I could take a picture right now and in 3 seconds have it posted up there, it gets in the way of thinking through things. We become very impulsive, and kids, they have a natural bent towards that. So as parents, we need to be aware of that. So I think about the good words that come to us in the scriptures. Proverbs 29:20. Do you see a man who speaks in haste? There is more hope for a fool than for him. Or Proverbs 10:19. When words are many, sin is not absent, but he who holds his tongue is wise.
I think we need to really focus on how we as adults are handling life without a pause, and teaching our kids how to instantly fix things and not taking time to think about things and really list out pros and cons. Social media took this into a whole new spin. So we don't pause when we comment on pictures. We don't pause when we are mad and we want to let someone know. Even adults, I don't know if you've ever gotten one, but I get a text that says, I just have to get this off my chest. We don't pause. We don't wait till the next time we're meeting for coffee to talk. You're gonna hit me up tonight and tell me how that bothered you. So I think that instant, people call it, it's not even gratification. It's just instant response. It's guttural response to everything. Makes us more anxious, more worried, more upset, less thoughtful, and we get used to fixing things.
So at this point, we observe something coming to the surface. Maybe social media isn't the problem, but it's how we use it. Maybe connecting with people online isn't a problem, but instead some of the ways that social media has influenced us or brought pre-existing challenges to light.
You are totally right. What this shows me is that throwing social media out completely isn't necessarily the solution, but instead, building healthy practices and structure around it is better. Let's transition now into a healthy way that we can engage social media as parents, starting with Walt, who lays down a biblical foundation for engaging social media.
Theologically, when it comes to things like social media and technology, a couple of things that come to mind that are really helpful. One is, we tend to live these lives that are not integrated. What I mean by that is Christians oftentimes have their faith, and they exercise their faith in their Bible study. They exercise their faith on Sunday mornings, whenever they're in worship. But then they really don't see the connect between faith and the rest of life. And the reality is that we are called to be integrated human beings, not disintegrated, and integrated in the sense that our faith is woven in and through every square inch, every nook and cranny, every second, every minute of our lives. Our faith informs all those things. And all of life is worship. I think we've been lulled to sleep thinking when we hear the word worship, we default immediately in our minds to what happens on Sunday mornings or Saturday nights when the house lights go down and the spotlights go up and the fog machine turns on and, the amplifiers are turning on. That's worship, right? No, worship is a 24/7 endeavor. We engage in corporate worship with others physically present in the body of Christ, but worship is 24/7. So I think we need to see first that the way we use these tools is an act of worship. Now, a very practical thing that's been helpful to me is there's a theologian by the name of Albert Walters who wrote a book years ago called Creation Regained. I won't go into the whole message of the book, but he is basically talking and teaching from a perspective of, all of life is to be lived under the lordship of Christ, and we're to redeem everything, our time, our vocation, our relationships, our instruments, all things, our tools. And he talks about the difference between structure and direction. And what's helpful here is to think about, the smartphone as a structure, and then just ask the question, okay, so I have the structure. in what direction am I going to use it? To what kingdom will I bring glory? And I get to that in these questions I ask. Does this bring honor and glory? Does it advance the kingdom of God? Or is the way I'm using this advancing the kingdoms of the world, the flesh, and the devil, which are opposite to what we should be doing? I think that's a good rule for everything that you encounter in life. So our play, our relationships, our academics, our vocational choices, the way we drive, the way we spend our money. I mean, we could just go on and on and on with that. But those principles have been very helpful for me in a very simple way.
Okay, let's switch gears. We've talked about the importance of maintaining a healthy relationship with social media, recognizing and rejecting some of the impulsiveness that pops up, and seeing our online lives as an act of worship. But as far as parenting in this area, that is just the beginning. Your kids are in a very different place from you developmentally. So there is great wisdom in creating very practical structure and parameters around social media use and introducing it to your children in stages.
Well, I always go back to just a simple, metaphor of if you're going to take your kid to a carnival, right? If you're going to take your 15-year-old and drop them off at a carnival, and you're going to let them go for the night, you're not just going to give them a $50 bill and say, peace, see you in 4 hours. There's parameters. Stay where the lights are on. Make sure the ride looks like it's going to, go around a couple times. Watch out for this. These are the people that, there might be people trying to sell you drugs. Stay with somebody. Don't be alone anywhere. Check in with each other every hour or text me every hour. You have these parameters.
For past generations, parents were at least somewhat aware of what kids were getting exposed to because it wasn't so private. Just that, couple of feet between the screen and someone's eyes. If you're not inhabiting that as a parent, you're not going to know what's going into their eyes and into their brains and into their minds and into their hearts. And so it is largely coming in now unfiltered, and there's virtually anything there.
We forget to set parameters. And we know all these things. We're scared about all these things, but we don't have these open conversations. And I think open conversations, just like we parent through anything, are vital, and they have to continue. It's not just when they're 11 and they get their phone. It has to continue and continue and continue. There's a really well-paid speaker out there right now that's telling everybody to buy their teenagers flip phones to avoid all this, which I think is, a super safe lane, I guess. And I guess it makes you a lot of money to speak about that because parents dig it. But the reality is, you're just not preparing them for the ocean that eventually they're going to be in.
I love that Kara brings this up. Sometimes, in an effort to protect our children, we rob them of an opportunity to grow and develop the necessary tools for thriving online. At the same time, this should happen in stages. Listen as Kara talks about the idea of starting with a small pond.
I'm always a small pond girl. Jason, you've heard me say this a million times. So a small pond starts in the 5th or 6th grade. You get them, if you get the smartphone, then you get them on Instagram. Your kids love you. They're listening to, if you've done everything right, your kids are hopefully still liking you, and you can help them friend 4 people that everybody knows. And you teach them about posting, you walk through it with them, and for a couple of years, you do it together. And then if something comes up, which actually you hope something little comes up, maybe they see their friends were at a party last night and they didn't invite you. Oh my gosh, let's talk about that. That hurts, doesn't it? But let's talk about what social media is. It's gradual, small pond training. Then we move to a lake, and then we're ready for the ocean. And now we're still talking because that's just what we do in our home. We talk about all of our relationships and what's going on. And then when they're not telling you everything in high school, that's just like anything else. You've trained them up, you've talked about it, and they do have to kind of try swimming on their own. But they know that you know what they're doing. And I don't know. Conversations it seems like whenever I say this, it's like basic parenting. But for some reason, when we make social media this island that doesn't involve us, it becomes something people struggle with parenting through.
Another part of being equipped as a parent is knowing where your kids are spending their time, what they're being exposed to, and what's popular. Listen as Kara breaks down some of the most popular places that kids spend their time online.
The big ones where everybody's gathering are going to be Snapchat, TikTok has blown up. So Snapchat and Instagram, let's talk about those. They're actually very similar, except of who can see what scenario. I always say anymore, like I used to define apps, but all of them now offer video chat, secret DMs or messaging, friending, following, subscribing, unfriending, blocking. They all offer the same avenues for communication, and all of them all offer privacy settings. And let's talk a little bit about that. A teenager really fears privacy settings because that's going to eliminate someone from liking their picture. And if I'm posting something, I want a lot of people to like it. So on Instagram, you get the instant likes, right? Most of us know this. It's just like Facebook. You get a like, you get a heart. You can see how many people liked your picture. You go on Snapchat, and if you post something, people slide up. And when they slide up, they leave a heart or a message. Now, nobody else can see how many times they slid up on your picture, but you can. So it's another level of validation, and that your picture was good or that people liked what you were doing. There's validation on all these, which also brings in, the other side of that, where you feel like you're not accepted and you're not valued. Snapchat, whatever you post, you get to choose what goes on the public platform they call the story. Instagram, when you post a picture, it goes to your stream. It's like a Facebook. It goes to your stream. So it's not really private. They now have implemented stories, but again, you can't choose who sees that story. It's anybody who follows you. So a little more protected in Snapchat, especially when you're talking about adults monitoring. But same technology, they all do the same flipping thing. And it's all for the validation or connection with people, I would say. TikTok was originally Musical.ly. You guys remember Musical.ly? So Musical.ly, you play, oh gosh, I love Musical.ly too. So, you play Justin Bieber's Sorry, and you get to like sing it, you get to lip sync it and make a video, and it's just amazing. Well, they've upped that, and now you can do the dance. And so there's these trends, and there's dance trends where you can get TikTok famous. This has been super fun to watch because I'm in it again because I have teenagers, and I knew right away what it was, and I loved Musical.ly. So I'm in it right away. But no, most adults don't know this TikTok phenomenon.
Next, Kira mentioned some apps to watch out for that could potentially include pornography or other content that can be harmful to your children.
Like if parents take away their Snapchat, they're going to download WhatsApp. Well, you get things like WhatsApp and other ones that are kind of edgy. And how are they funded? Typically, they're funded by companies that are trying to get teens' attention. And I've heard from teens myself that that's where you're seeing a lot of the porn polls and clickbait are on these off-center apps because they're not getting the same attention as a Snapchat, and they got to make money. And so who's coming to those who's going to feed those people money? Also, a lot of kids are on Discord, and Discord is a conversation app that can go bad. So you want to know what group your kid's in on that. And there's a lot of gaming groups. It's a big app for gaming conversations. But also there's a lot of trying to get you into other groups and links sent to conversations.
We asked Kara to give a final word of encouragement for parents.
Yeah, I would just say I'm always just talk to your kids and never stop. Like even when they're seniors, don't stop. You have to be involved in talking with your kids, knowing what they're doing, set parental controls on everything. I mean, even outside of social media, everything. What time? We can have curfews still. We can limit their drive time. Everything needs to be guided. They're desperately seeking guidance. So let's do that in social media as well. Let's just keep the conversation going. And if you want to know about all these things, this is what always, is curious to me. Parents want to know more, but they're not really looking for it. So, get on the internet. The internet can give you everything. Go on there and research. Common Sense Media. I taught my kids when they were really little to get on Common Sense Media before they downloaded an app and tell me what it says. So they would put it in and say, oh, it's recommended for ages 11 and up, and it's because of this, this, and this. And that's a conversation. So do you think it's appropriate for your phone? Do you think that movie's appropriate to watch with your friends? Teach them to find the boundaries that you guys can work within. I don't know. I don't think it's really hard, but for some reason there's a fear in us of being that involved in it, I guess.
Now, we're going to do something a little bit different here to end this podcast because what we realize is this is a unique cultural moment.
For that reason, we wanted to address it specifically, along with all the unique challenges and opportunities that come with it.
So this week's episode is going to get released, and then what we're going to be doing is following up with a very specific one on social media that fits with you and your family during this time of quarantine.
We hope you'll tune in for the next episode this week.
Thanks again for listening to the Sex Plus Christian Parents podcast. This podcast is brought to you by the wonderful people at Project 619. This episode was edited, produced, and sound designed by our very own Corey Crawford.